My wife looked me dead in the eye 3 days before her birthday party and said, "My ex is coming to my birthday. Be cool, or it's over." I told her, calmly, "I'll be very cool." She had absolutely no idea what those 5 words actually meant until the night of the party, when I greeted her ex at the front door myself, shook his hand, and said, "She's all yours, man." I was just leaving, and walked straight out into the night. Her party ended within 20 minutes of me leaving that house. My name is Owen Bexley, and this is the story of the birthday party that ended my marriage, and honestly, looking back now, probably should have ended a lot sooner than it did. I need to give you some background first, because that single sentence she said to me didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final piece of a much longer pattern I'd been quietly noticing for almost 2 years. I married my wife, Renata, when I was 31 years old. We met through mutual friends, hit it off almost immediately, and honestly, for the first several years of our relationship, things felt genuinely good, easy in that way relationships feel when you're not yet paying close enough attention to the small warning signs that eventually add up to something bigger. Renata had a fairly serious relationship before me, with a man named Diego, someone she'd dated for almost 4 years in her mid-20s before they broke up over what she always described, whenever it came up, as just growing in different directions. I never had a huge problem with the fact that she had a serious ex in her past. That's normal. Most adults come into new relationships with history. What started bothering me, gradually, over the 2 years leading up to that birthday party, was the particular way Diego kept resurfacing in Renata's life, always framed as harmless, always explained away, but happening with a frequency that started to feel less like coincidence and more like something neither of us was fully naming out loud. It started small, the way these things usually do. Renata mentioning that she'd run into Diego at some mutual friend's engagement party, nothing unusual about that on its own. Then a few months later, mentioning that she and Diego had grabbed coffee to catch up after running into each other again, a conversation she brought up so casually I almost didn't think twice about it. Then, slowly, over the following year, Diego's name started appearing more consistently, texts she'd occasionally mention getting from him, social media comments I noticed once or twice when I happened to see her phone screen, nothing dramatic on its own, but accumulating into a pattern that, looking back now, I probably should have addressed directly much sooner than I did. I did bring it up, actually, about 8 months before that birthday party, gently, trying not to sound accusatory, just genuinely asking whether she still had feelings for Diego, given how consistently his name kept coming up in our conversations. Renata got defensive immediately, told me I was being paranoid and insecure, that Diego was simply an old friend at this point, that I needed to trust her more instead of turning every innocent interaction into some kind of interrogation. I remember feeling, in that moment, like maybe I really was overreacting, like maybe the problem actually was my own insecurity rather than anything happening between the two of them. So I let it go, mostly, told myself I needed to trust my wife the way she'd asked me to. But that quiet, nagging feeling never fully went away, even as I tried to bury it under the reasonable-sounding logic that I was simply being paranoid over nothing. Then came the conversation about her birthday party. Renata had been planning it for weeks, a fairly large gathering at our house, close to 40 guests, friends, family, co-workers. 3 days before the party, she sat me down, and I could tell immediately from her expression that something specific was coming. She told me, somewhat awkwardly at first, that Diego had recently reconnected with several of their old mutual friends and had, through one of them, ended up on the guest list for her birthday party before she'd even fully realized what was happening. I want to be honest about what I felt hearing that. Part of me was genuinely stunned that she'd let this happen at all, that an ex she'd been quietly, consistently connecting with for nearly 2 years was now going to be a guest at her birthday party in our own home. But what actually crossed the line for me wasn't even that Diego was coming. It was what Renata said immediately after explaining the situation, this strange, almost threatening tone I'd genuinely never heard from her before in our entire relationship. She said, "My ex is coming to my birthday. Be cool, or it's over." I want you to really sit with that sentence for a second, the way I had to sit with it standing in our kitchen that evening. Not an apology for the awkward situation. Not an acknowledgement that maybe this whole thing had gotten a little out of hand. Just a direct threat, framed as though my reasonable discomfort about my wife's ex attending our house party was somehow the actual problem here, something I needed to simply manage quietly and correctly, or risk losing the marriage entirely. I remember something shifting inside me in that exact moment, some kind of quiet, clear resolve I hadn't fully felt before during those 2 years of gradually swallowing my concerns. I looked at her and said, calmly, "I'll be very cool." She actually smiled when I said that, visibly relieved, clearly assuming I meant I was going to quietly tolerate the situation the way I had every other time Diego's name came up over the previous 2 years. If you've ever had a partner ask you to simply be cool about something that was genuinely hurting you, framing your reasonable feelings as the actual problem in the relationship, I think you already understand exactly the kind of quiet decision I made standing in that kitchen. And if this story is already pulling you in, go ahead and subscribe now, because what happened the night of that party is honestly the part people message me about the most. The night of the party arrived, and I want to be clear, I didn't spend those 3 days plotting some elaborate scheme. What I did instead was something much simpler and, I think, much more honest. I spent those 3 days finally allowing myself to fully acknowledge everything I'd been quietly suppressing for 2 years, the pattern of Diego's constant, casual reappearance in our relationship, Renata's defensiveness whenever I raised it, and now, finally, this open threat framing my legitimate discomfort as something I needed to simply manage for her comfort. I decided, calmly and clearly, exactly what I was going to do that night, and I want to explain why I chose the specific approach I did, because I think it matters. I wasn't interested in causing a dramatic scene in front of 40 guests, screaming, making accusations, turning Renata's birthday into chaos. That's not who I am, and honestly, it wouldn't have accomplished anything except making me look unstable in front of people who barely knew the full context anyway. What I wanted instead was something quieter, something that would communicate exactly how I felt without a single raised voice. When Diego arrived that evening, right on time, dressed sharply, clearly comfortable walking into a party celebrating the birthday of a woman he'd apparently stayed unusually close with for years after their breakup, I made sure I was the one who answered the door. I remember his expression shifting slightly when he saw me there, a brief flicker of surprise, quickly covered with a polite, practiced smile. I extended my hand, shook his firmly, and said, clearly, calmly, loud enough for several nearby guests to hear naturally without me needing to make any kind of scene about it, "She's all yours, man, I was just leaving." Then I turned, picked up the small bag I'd already quietly packed and left by the front door earlier that afternoon, and walked out into the night, leaving Diego standing there in the doorway, visibly confused, and leaving Renata's birthday party to unfold entirely without me. I want to describe what I later learned happened inside that house within about 20 minutes of me leaving, because the ripple effect was honestly bigger than I expected. Several guests, close friends of ours who had absolutely no idea about the 2 years of quiet tension leading up to that moment, immediately started asking Renata what exactly had just happened, why her husband had greeted her ex at the door and walked out entirely. Renata, apparently, tried at first to laugh it off, make some vague excuse about me not feeling well, but the confusion in the room only grew once people started noticing Diego himself standing awkwardly near the entrance, clearly having no better explanation than she did. According to what several mutual friends told me afterward, the party's energy completely collapsed within about 20 minutes. People started quietly leaving, uncomfortable with the strange tension now hanging over what was supposed to be a celebration. By the time Renata finally tried explaining the actual situation, most of her guests had either already left or were clearly eager to. I spent that night at a hotel downtown, and I want to be honest, it wasn't some triumphant, celebratory night for me. I felt genuinely sad, mourning something I'd quietly known for a while now had probably been slipping away for longer than I wanted to admit. But underneath that sadness, there was also this strange, clear sense of relief, finally allowing myself to stop pretending that 2 years of quiet discomfort was simply insecurity I needed to manage privately. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a great time, because what happened over the following weeks, between Renata and me, and eventually between Renata and Diego, honestly surprised even me. Renata called me relentlessly over the following days, first angry, accusing me of deliberately humiliating her at her own birthday party in front of everyone she cared about. I let her be angry, honestly, because in a strange way, I understood it, even while knowing I hadn't actually done anything except finally stop pretending everything was fine. Eventually, her anger shifted into something closer to genuine reflection, and during one particularly long, honest phone call about 2 weeks after the party, she finally admitted something I'd suspected quietly for a long time, that some part of her had genuinely never fully let go of her relationship with Diego, and that keeping him loosely present in her life over those 2 years, even while married to me, had been a way of avoiding fully committing to that decision one way or the other. I want to be clear, we didn't magically reconcile after that admission. If anything, that honest conversation confirmed for both of us that our marriage had probably been quietly unraveling for a lot longer than either of us wanted to admit while it was actually happening. We finalized our divorce about 6 months later, handled it about as amicably as two people can handle something like that, honestly, once all the difficult feelings had a chance to settle. As for Diego, from what I understand through mutual friends, he and Renata did eventually start seeing each other again seriously, several months after our divorce finalized, which honestly didn't surprise me much given everything that had led up to that birthday party in the first place. I hope, genuinely, that whatever they build together this time is honest and clear in a way our marriage, by the end, clearly wasn't. I think about that birthday party sometimes, standing in that doorway, shaking Diego's hand, walking out into the night air feeling like I was finally putting down something I'd been quietly carrying for 2 full years. I don't think about it with much anger anymore, mostly I think about it as the moment I finally stopped accepting, "be cool," as a reasonable response to my own legitimate feelings being consistently dismissed. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. When someone asks you to simply be cool about something that's genuinely hurting you, pay close attention to what they're actually asking, because sometimes what sounds like a small request for patience is really just someone asking you to quietly disappear a little more, until eventually there's nothing left of you in the relationship at all. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe to the channel, because there are more stories exactly like this one coming every week, honest, real, and sometimes surprising in ways you don't expect. Thank you for listening to mine.